Just recently, I heard a news item, or actually looked at a new study about a nutrient that is not familiar to just about anybody. It's a common nutrient found in many foods, but it offers some remarkable effects. This particular substance is categorized as a flavanol, and it's called Fisetin. Now, what this study did or showed was that dosing with Fisetin destroys 25 to 50% of senescent cells, depending on the organ and method of measurement. Now, what are senescent cells? As cells age, they go through a number of replications. After a while, it has to do with the structures. I don't want to go into a lot of physiology, but there's these little things on the end of chromosomes called telomeres, and they gradually shorten every time a cell replicates itself. Eventually, the telomeres shorten to the point where the cells cannot properly replicate themselves, and what happens is they don't replicate anymore, and it becomes a senescent cell. A senescent cell just sits there. It's not doing anything, and when they add up, they can interfere with the activity of normal cells, and they can cause a lot of health problems, including brain degeneration, cardiac aging of the heart, aging of the skin, aging of the muscles. In fact, cellular senescence, as it's called, is now considered one of the main, if not the primary cause of aging in human beings. Now, I'm going to have a complete article on all the natural methods and even a couple of drug methods that are currently in the pipeline on how to deal with senescent cells. Even as we speak, there's a couple of companies that these what do they call these venture capitalists are investing billions of dollars in these companies, which are attempting to develop drugs that will clear out these senescent cells, right? But it turns out that this actual natural substance, Fisetin, can actually work better than the drugs that are in experimental stage right now. Because, like I said, Fisetin destroys 25 to 50% of senescent cells. This would have an incredible effect on aging. Now, for age, it was a mouse study, I should tell you right now. The mouse is a one-time treatment. The researchers gave the mice 100 milligrams per kilogram of body weight for 5 days. The usual approach is to scale up estimated doses from mouse studies to initial human trials, which means that if you wanted to give the same amount that they gave to the mice to humans, to a person that weighs 60 kilograms or about 132 pounds, this would mean 500 milligrams a day of Fisetin. And let me tell you, that's a lot more than you'll get in any natural source of Fisetin. And I'm going to tell you in a minute the foods that contain Fisetin. But the number one food for Fisetin is strawberries. Strawberries contain the highest amounts of Fisetin. As I said, Fisetin is categorized as a flavanol. It's a chemical that belongs in the flavonoid group of polyphenols. These are all natural antioxidants. Green tea has polyphenols, red wine, polyphenols. Fisetin is a type of plant pigment that gives color to many fruits and vegetables, like strawberries, the reddish color. Out of a number of studied flavonoids, Fisetin was found to be the most effective at causing new brain growth. That's what attracted me to Fisetin. This is how I came across it. I was doing some research on something else, and I came across some incidental studies. Again, all animal studies, but quite a few of them showed remarkable effects on the brain induced by this stuff, Fisetin, particularly in an area of the brain called the hippocampus, which is the site of memory and learning in the brain, the main site. Now, what the animal studies have showed thus far is an enhancement of long-term memory. This is all by Fisetin. Activation of neurite growth. Neurite growth is the growth of new neurons in the brain. Antioxidant effects, which protects the brain. Induction of intracellular levels of glutathione, which is one of the primary natural antioxidants in the body. If you give Fisetin to animals that had an induced stroke, it reduces the behavioral deficits following a stroke. In other words, if you give Fisetin to an animal that had the human equivalent of a stroke, it greatly improves the way they're able to move and think. It helps the body recover from strokes. It also suppresses intracellular immune cell activation, especially in the brain. I'll talk about that a little later. It involves these brain structures called microglia. I'll explain that a little later. Fisetin also provides natural antidepressant effects. And depression, by the way, is one of the great risk factors for brain degeneration, such as Alzheimer's disease. It also protects against ischemic reperfusion injury, which is that more is likely to happen. Let's say if you have a heart surgery or something where they cut off the blood supply, you get a lot of antioxidants. But I'm not even going to go into that, but that's just one of the things it does. And one of the reasons Fisetin possesses so much brain-boosting effects is because it can cross the protective brain-blood barrier. What is the brain-blood barrier? It's a series of blood vessels that works to protect the brain from noxious elements that would otherwise cross into the brain and cause brain damage. The blood-brain barrier is very selective. In other words, it only allows certain nutrients and other substances to get into the brain. This is very good. In fact, as people get older, there tends to be a breakdown in the blood-brain barrier, and this allows, again, noxious or dangerous substances to get in the brain, which actually can cause brain damage and, again, brain degeneration. Fisetin can get through the blood-brain barrier, which is a very good feature. By the way, just incidentally, there's an antioxidant very effective at getting into the brain called astaxanthin. It's found in fish, particularly salmon, and it's subject of another video or another article. But astaxanthin is a very powerful brain antioxidant. It's one of the few that can get into the brain. Most of the antioxidants that you ingest, a lot of them don't really effectively enter the brain because of the protective blood-brain barrier. Fisetin supplementation increases the strength of long-term memory pathways by modifying certain signaling and increasing brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is a protein produced in the brain which repairs and maintains the health of neurons or brain cells. So in this way, it might be useful for memory disorders such as Alzheimer's. Research right now is looking at Fisetin as a possible preventive treatment against the onset of Alzheimer's because it stimulates brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which, by the way, is also stimulated by exercise. Every time you work out, particularly do aerobic exercise where your heart rate goes up, you stimulate BDNF, very good for your brain. This is one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, why exercise helps to protect the brain and may stave off the onset of various degenerative brain diseases, including Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. One mechanism by which Fisetin might protect against degenerative brain conditions is also by activating certain transcription factors, such as nuclear factor 2, that increase the cellular levels, or I should say NRF2. NRF2 you can also increase by eating, a very good way to do that is by eating cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, turnips, Brussels sprouts. This also increases the activity of NRF2. NRF2 in turn increases the intracellular activity of glutathione, which is again one of the key antioxidant enzymes in the body. It's composed of 3 amino acids. I've done a past video on glutathione. You might refer to that. But I can tell you that people, in studies where they've examined older people that are much healthier, that don't have any brain degeneration and can move freely, they always have high levels of glutathione in their body. So it's definitely related to aging. Fisetin protects nerve cells from oxidative stress, and oxidative death is one of the many reasons why you get cognitive decline with age. That's why your brain goes bad, because it's constant assaults. Your brain has a lot of mitochondria. They produce free radicals or reactive oxygen species, they're called. These things attack the fat in your brain. Your brain is 70% fat. These free radicals attack them, break them down. It leads to brain diseases. So if you can keep the oxidation in the brain under control, you can actually protect your brain. This is one of the things that Fisetin does. Animal studies show that Fisetin limits the accumulation of harmful compounds such as phosphorylated tau that accumulate in the brain and cause Alzheimer's disease. Again, this requires a bit of an explanation. The current theory as to what causes Alzheimer's disease is the accumulation of 2 proteins. One is called beta amyloid, the other one is called tau. Tau becomes dangerous when enzymes phosphorylate. In other words, it combines with phosphorus and it induces what they call neurofibrillary tangles. This messes up the neurons in the brain. Boom. That combined with beta amyloid you have Alzheimer's disease. So anything that can prevent phosphorylated tau will help protect your brain, and Fisetin does that. Alzheimer's is also characterized, as I said, by accumulation of beta amyloid. And again, mouse studies have shown that Fisetin protects the brains of mice against damage caused by the effects of beta amyloid and other neurotoxic compounds. Fisetin is also useful for decreasing inflammation in microglia. This is what I was leading up to. What is microglia? Your brain is composed of 10 to 15% microglia. What they are the immune cells of the brain. They function like macrophages in your immune system. That is, they engulf foreign material in the brain. Let's say something gets past that protective blood-brain barrier. The microglia come into play. They immediately attack whatever shouldn't be in the brain, and they break it down and they destroy it in an effort to protect your brain. The bad part is, how do microglia work? They work by causing inflammation. In other words, they're an inflammatory substance. Unfortunately, as people get older, microglia activity tends to get out of control, causing excess brain inflammation, which is again very, very harmful to the brain. Inflammation in the brain is again a cornerstone of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease and other brain degenerative diseases. So anything that can control microglia and lower the inflammation of the brain is going to be very brain protective. Fisetin is known to do that. In one study, mice treated with Fisetin showed a reduction in behavioral abnormalities after a stroke. As I said earlier, it seems to protect against stroke. Another study confirmed that Fisetin helps to protect whatever part of the brain is starved of blood during a stroke. In other words, when you have a stroke, certain forms of stroke, your brain doesn't get enough blood and oxygen. This kills off the neurons. Fisetin might help prevent that effect, thereby minimizing the damage caused by strokes. Of course, you'd have to be ingesting Fisetin regularly to have a protective effect. You can't take it after a stroke once the damage is done, although Fisetin will help repair the brain. It all depends on the extent of damage by the stroke. If it's a massive stroke, Fisetin's probably not going to be able to do as much. 10 flavonoids, including Fisetin, were tested in their ability to protect brain cells against glutamate toxicity. Now when you're having a stroke, there's a brain neurotransmitter called glutamate, which is made from glutamic acid. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. Under normal conditions, it helps you, accelerates learning and memory. It increases your intelligence. But when you're having a stroke, too much glutamine is produced, and you get what they call an excitotoxic effect, where the glutamine itself, the excess glutamine itself, actually kills off the neurons. And this is the main cause of damage during strokes, excess glutamate activity. And it turns out that Fisetin was one of the 4 flavonoids, 4 out of 10, that increased antioxidant defenses enough to limit toxicity caused by glutamine. Fisetin also increases sirtuin-1, or SIRT1. That's a protein linked to longevity that's shown to be neuroprotective. It's also found in red wine. It's also increased by, you might have heard of resveratrol. SIRT1 is a cell protective protein, and Fisetin increases that too. Fisetin is a potent antidepressant that can increases serotonin and norepinephrine in the brain. These things are the 2 brain neurotransmitters that tend to be low when you're depressed. Most antidepressant drugs work by increasing either serotonin or norepinephrine or both. Fisetin does it naturally without any side effects. Fisetin also inhibits the activity of lipoxygenases. These are enzymes that act on fatty acids and produce tremendous inflammation. As a matter of fact, there's an asthma drug that I happen to use. What the hell's the name of it? Oh God, I can't remember it offhand, but I use it at night, 1 tablet at night, and what it does, it inhibits these same lipoxygenases, and they've actually shown studies that this particular drug, because of that, helps to prevent Alzheimer's disease, which is great, because I have to take it anyway because I have asthma. But anyway, Fisetin does the same thing, so you don't have to take asthma pills to get the same effect. As I said, if you reduce the activity of lipoxygenases, your level of inflammation goes down. Fisetin may be also a promising candidate, again, because of the anti-inflammatory effects. It might be useful in the treatment of various inflammatory bowel diseases. Treatment with Fisetin suppresses the activation of mast cells. Mast cells are cells that structures that actually release inflammatory compounds. They're implicated in the cause of asthma and other inflammatory disease. So by suppressing the activation of mast cells, the Fisetin also reduces inflammation. Fisetin also induces the cell death and inhibits the growth of various types of cancer, including skin, the most dangerous form of skin cancer, melanoma, pancreatic cancer, the most fatal type of cancer, pancreatic cancer, which has less than a 5% survival rate after 5 years. The only way to survive pancreatic cancer is to have it found early. It's usually found during incidental examinations where doctors are checking on something else and they happen to notice an early tumor in the pancreas. Those can be treated. A person can live if it's gotten early, but most of the time, by the time they find pancreatic cancer, it's spread all through your body, your internal organs, and you basically don't have much time. You know, it's Michael Landon got a diagnosis from, you might remember him from Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was dead 3 months later. It also, Fisetin also helps to protect against colon cancer, lung cancer, and prostate cancer. Again, probably related to the anti-inflammatory effects of Fisetin, because cancer is very inflammatory. Inflammation promotes cancer. A rodent study found that Fisetin relaxes drug-induced contraction of blood vessels, and in that way it lowers blood pressure. This action occurs regardless of blood pressure function. Diabetic mice fed a diet high in Fisetin stayed diabetic. Didn't they cure their diabetes? But one of the complications of diabetes is severe kidney disease. You can actually progress to kidney failure, renal failure. But when they gave the animals Fisetin, even though it didn't cure the diabetes, it seemed to protect the animals or the rodents against kidney abnormalities associated with having diabetes. Fisetin maintains stable blood glucose levels. The problem with diabetes is that the blood glucose levels tend to go high. Elevated blood glucose causes a lot of damage. It's also related to increased mortality. And it's one of the reasons why diabetes, I think it's the fourth highest mortality rate of any disease. But Fisetin maintains stable glucose levels by increasing insulin sensitivity, and it results in a lower glycosylated hemoglobin. Glycosylated hemoglobin is a measure of long-term glucose control over several months. It should be below 5. If it's over 5, it's an indication that your blood sugar has been too high for too long, and there's a lot of damage going on in your body. You won't feel it, but it's happening. It's called advanced glycosylation. That's going to be the subject of an article in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, because it's also a major cause of aging. Mice that underwent Fisetin treatment had less weight increase than mice that did not. Unfortunately, a large majority of the studies with Fisetin haven't involved animals. You know, and you've heard me in past videos say this, I'll say it again. Just because something occurs in animals with any substance or drug does not mean that it's going to happen in humans. However, I will also say that most of the mechanisms that Fisetin are involved in also exist in the human body. So I would say there's a very good chance that Fisetin replicates the same effects or the health benefits that occur in animals are also replicated in humans. In mice with estrogen deficiency or inflammation, the consumption of Fisetin results in less bone mass loss. Women who are low in estrogen for many years get a disease called osteoporosis, because estrogen is needed to maintain bone mass. And it turns out that even women who are low in estrogen, if they consume enough Fisetin, they'll have far less bone mass than if they didn't ingest Fisetin. Fisetin lowers the expression of various genes associated with skin aging. COX-2, MMP1, I won't go into all of them, but Fisetin also inhibits UVB-induced collagen degradation. In other words, when you go in the sun, or the main cause of facial aging is exposure to UVB rays, ultraviolet B rays, by the sun. And it turns out that what happens is that those UVB rays break down the proteins in your skin, such as collagen and elastin. And when this happens, you get signs of aging, such as wrinkles. And it turns out Fisetin inhibits UVB-induced collagen degradation, which is, as I said, a key factor in skin aging. Fisetin reduced the cellular levels of UV, ultraviolet-induced reactive oxygen species, prostaglandin E2, and nitric oxide. Nitric oxide in large amounts acts as a free radical. In other words, it's good for you in low amounts, and bad amounts, it causes oxidation effects. So, that's why you don't want to have unlimited amounts of nitric oxide. I've said that in past articles. Fisetin is able to enhance and maintain ATP levels during oxidative stress, which is very good for your workouts because that means it'll help maintain energy stores. The oral now they just came out with a new study right before I made this video. I noticed it, 2018 study. The title of it is Oral Administration of Fisetin Promotes the Induction of Hippocampal Long-Term Potentiation. In other words, because Fisetin can cross the protective blood-brain barrier, it protects that hippocampus structure of the cell, and this leads to enhanced memory and protects your memory and learning as you age. That's an incredible effect. That means that Fisetin can be considered a smart nutrient. Now, where do you get Fisetin? Okay, here's a little chart. I don't know if you could see this too well. Here, I'll hold it up in the camera. But basically, what it shows you various foods. By far, the greatest natural source of Fisetin is strawberries. It contains 160 micrograms per gram. That's very little. A microgram is 1/1000th of a milligram. And as I said, the animal studies show that you'd have to be taking, doses of Fisetin to really cause health effects, such as this, this lowering of senescent cells. You're talking about doses of like 500 milligrams. So that would require a supplement. Apples contain Fisetin. Persimmons contain it. Lotus fruit, onions, grape, kiwi, peach, and cucumbers. Peaches and cucumbers contain just about trace amounts of Fisetin, but they do contain it. You'd have to eat a pound of strawberries to get the same dose of Fisetin found in supplemental forms. A good supplemental dose for health preventive effects, I would say, is 100 to 150 milligrams a day. However, keep in mind, let me repeat this just to be clear, the great preponderance of studies that have shown all these health benefits of Fisetin have involved animal studies. There's very, very human research to prove this. So if you take Fisetin, you're basically taking it on a kind of a scientific hunch that it will work. And again, let me repeat, the mechanisms that work in animals also exist in humans. So again, a good chance that Fisetin will provide the same effects, but there's no real evidence for that as of now. Fisetin is in supplemental form. If you're interested in taking it, do a Google search for Fisetin supplements. You can. I'm not going to mention any brand names because I want to keep my videos non-commercial. Unlike many other YouTube videos where you hear a bunch of information at the end of it, they're pushing some sort of product, some supplement. The only product I will push right now is my Applied Metabolic newsletter, where I cover supplements, exercise science, hormonal therapy, anti-aging research, fat loss techniques that work, women's health, many other topics, 40 to 50 pages every month, no ads. I'm not trying to push any supplements. I just tell you the truth about supplements. In fact, I'll save you a lot of money by talking about which supplements work and which supplements don't work. Bruno wants to say hello. There he is, Bruno the Fisetin dog. And also, if you subscribe to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, I will send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page. And subscribers can also send me short questions via the Applied Metabolics email portal on the Applied Metabolics site. I'll answer short questions at no extra charge for subscribers only. I don't answer unsolicited questions. That's right, I don't answer unsolicited questions. Don't ask me an unsolicited question. Anyway, he was going to ask me an unsolicited question. Anyway, so subscribe today to Applied Metabolics. It's www.appliedmetabolics.com. I think it's personally. I've seen other digital publications. I think it's the most in-depth digital publication you'll ever find. It contains information you won't find on any website or any blog. And it's not just anyone can write science, but few people can match my 57 years of both empirical and academic study. In other words, I learned a lot of stuff in the gym, and I learned a lot of stuff from studying. I don't think there's no one I know of who could match this, who's still alive. Einstein could, but he's dead. But, but hey, what's going on? Wait. So that's it. If you want to get, again, please subscribe, www.appliedmetabolics.com. If you want to have the best friend you ever had, like this little guy, see him? Go to your local shelter and adopt a dog. Right, Bruno? Tell him. Bruno, adopt. He's saying, adopt a dog. Okay. Take care. Thanks for listening.